So finally in 2006, 16 season comes out after all those years of like purgatory with record labels and shopping demos and all that stuff. That album has 3 singles. So there's Tell Me, Waiting Around, and Maggot. I actually owned that album when it came out. I was a fan.
Thank you.
Tell Me was a legit top 20 hit in Canada. And like I mentioned, I went out to see you guys play twice around that time. What thoughts, memories, emotions come back when you think to that album finally coming out after everything you've been
Um,
through? And it's a great album. Like you guys actually pulled through.
well, we always believed it would be a great album if it ever got out there. It did get out there by accident at one point. The Atlantic record got leaked by some industrious friends who meant the best at the time. But if there's an infamous 13 song sampler, which is the record we made for Atlantic, plus 3 B-sides that were never going to be released, um, that got out there. But we really felt like we had something. It's kind of funny. Like, I've never really been someone to like brag or feel overly confident about anything in my life. But in the back of my head, I always knew we had something. That's because we had a great singer who could write great songs in Mike, and we had a great drummer in Ryan, and a really great guitar player in Sean. And I was kind of the guy who was sort of along for the ride, I guess, in my mind. You know, if someone tells me I was good at bass, I kind of, smile and nod, but I never really felt that way. But, it was vindication. You felt justified that all the work, all the heartache, I mean, we're talking really relative to music, the suffering, it's not like starving to death suffering, but, the emotional toll it takes on you, of working so hard for something, thinking you've gotten it and then having it taken away, and then thinking you've gotten it and having it taken away. When the record finally did come out, it felt really gratifying. And, we were so lucky, they say it takes an island, like, or it takes a village. There were so many people behind the scenes working so hard to keep us afloat in those years. And then once the record came out, there was, those same people kept pushing and kept pushing and kept us, on people's radar, and kept, and kept it going, and really helped us in a way that a lot of people who don't work in the industry wouldn't understand, especially because that kind of support isn't really there to that extent anymore. We literally had like a group of people who were dedicating most of their time to our success, regardless of our own designs.
Was Tell Me the first time you heard your own song on the radio? And if so, what was it like the first time
Um,
hearing your own music on the radio?
it wasn't the first time per se, because of some local stuff that happened when we were younger. 97.7 Hits FM in St. Catharines did a Battle of the Bands thing every year called Rock Search. The band that would become Finger 11 won it one year. The Trues won it one year.
Oh,
Um, we didn't win it, but we tried. We applied, so to speak, and got, I think, to like the second round or something. But part of it was they play your song on the radio, and then people call in and vote on whether they like it or not. This is like the late 90s, so there's not really a lot of internet going on. And then after the Atlantic deal, we had kind of gotten into this position where we were doing a charity show, and Dean Blundell from CFNY heard about it, and then heard about the band, played a song, and was like, wow, I really like this. So he played it on the radio, regardless of the fact that it wasn't on CFNY's playlist. And they never once played Idle Sons. And he kept talking up the band. And to have, a guy on the biggest radio station, arguably, in our neighborhood, talking about the band that was pretty big. When we started hearing Tell Me on the radio in Canada for the first time you hear it, it just sort of passes you by, and you're just like, wait, did I just hear that? I think that might have been me. And then, maybe a few hours later or something, you hear it again. What really blows your mind is when you start hearing it on different radio stations. So, like 97.7 was really big supporter of our band, huge. 107.9 in Hamilton was also a massive supporter. And then out west, CJ in Calgary, Sea Fox in Vancouver, and the Bear in Edmonton, and the Wolf in Regina, I think.
I think in Ottawa, I would hear it on both 106.9 The Bear, and I think I
Yeah.
would hear it on Live 88.5.
Live 88.5 definitely played it for sure. But it was the same sort of thing. Like when you start hearing it different places, then it starts sinking in like, oh wow, like maybe this might be doing something, you know? And then when your friends start texting you or calling you and be like, hey bro, like I'm in Edmonton and I just heard your song, like you know, that's when you're like, wow, this is really happening. Like this really is going somewhere. And for me, I mean, there was a huge wave of relief that like, okay, like this is all, you know, it's all coming together now. And, you know, and then there's like a little bit of doubt where you're like, well, what happens when they stop playing it? It's like, oh, geez, you know, like you can't even savor the victory for 1 minute, you know, you're always like, well, what do we do next?
Another metric that showed that things were happening was you guys got a Juno nomination. So this was for New Group of the Year in 2007. What does that Juno nomination mean to you? I mean, that's your country. That's Canada's Grammys. That's acknowledging your talent and your hard work.
Yeah, the Juno nomination is kind of bittersweet just because of where we were as a band at the time. By the time the nomination came, we were already talking about dissolving the band or breaking up. We sort of had some pretty strong riffs interpersonally amongst the four of us where we couldn't really get along anymore. Months on end in a van will do that to you. And so it was great. The recognition was amazing, you know. But when I look back on it, it's also sort of like, well, that's kind of like where it all ended. But fun fact, I think almost every band that was nominated that year broke up before the Junos. I think Mobile won, and they deserved it. They're great guys, and I think they broke up shortly after. But they're back together now, making records again. So, you know, the other ones were Evans Blue, which is a band that had a ton of success in the United States.
Oh man, they had I loved is it Cold? Evans Blue. They had one hit single called Cold.
I think that was Breaking Benjamin.
They had So Cold, yeah.
Oh yeah, So Cold, yeah. But yeah,
no,
I think
Evans Blue had this massive. It's like Cold, but I'm still something.
Oh yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, I was a massive fan of that one song. I didn't know the rest of.
The one guitar player in that band, Parker Lozon, was also from Burlington, and like we knew the guy and had no idea he was in this band because they almost exclusively worked in the U.S. But they were nominated. I think they broke up, but they got back together, and they're still making music. And Jets Overhead was, I think, the other band that was nominated. And I think they also broke up before the Junos.
I didn't even know that Evans Blue is Canadian. I guess you're saying that they were big in the U.S., and I have a U.S. association with them for some reason.
I think when they started the band, there were like 3 of the 5 guys were from Canada. And then as they progressed, it was like 1 of the 5 guys was from Canada. But they were definitely nominated that year as well.
That year had like the equivalent of like the Madden curse in football. Like whoever's on the cover of the Madden video game, it's like the next year gets injured or cut from their team or has a horrible season. So.
Well, for years and years and years, and I definitely hope I'm not speaking out of turn. A lot of people felt that award was like the kiss of death. Like if you won Best New Artist, something bad would happen to you the next year. In this turn of events, something just bad happened to all of the bands that year.
Yeah, that's strange. So I went back in preparation for this interview, and I listened to the album again with good headphones several times to really soak it back in, and I forgot how good that album was. And one of my comments is, you know, you've made a great album, you've made a solid album when there are 3 songs that are not singles that are 3 of my favorite on the album. Like you could have had 3 more singles on top of that. So I'm curious if you ever considered the following 3 songs, if they were ever in consideration to be a single. So a little bit less, Getaway, which is my absolute favorite song on that album, and This Evening. Were any of those 3 ever maybe going to be in the first 3 singles?
Well, let's see. A Little Bit Less was the last song we wrote for the record. We recorded it with Garth, and it had a totally different intro and pre-chorus. And Garth was sort of like, it's not really happening. Like, I don't know what to tell you guys, but this is your record. It's not mine. If I want to make my record, I'll just go make my record. So if you guys are really passionate about it, you can keep it. So we ended up compromising and taking part of what we were doing before and mixing it with some ideas that Garth and Ben Kaplan had. And that song was in contention to be a single at one point in time. But I think we were really married to some of the other songs because they had been around longer. Tell Me, I think, was the second last song written before the record, but it felt so immediate, Mike wrote all the songs and, collectively we worked on arrangement and stuff like that, but he was the primary songwriter and he felt really strongly about putting that out first. And we all agreed. Getaway, Mike wrote with Gavin Brown and Simon Wilcox helped with the lyrics.
Wow.
And then brought it to us and it was essentially done. We made changes to the bridge, was the only changes that we made in the song after they had worked on it, which was, I had suggested we do double stops, versus just kind of crew paddling through. And everybody kind of looked at me sort of sideways and like, all right, let's try it. And then it worked out and people were pretty happy. I think
the chorus in Getaway is so good, man. I love that chorus.
I think looking back, I don't think it ever entered the conversation, but I think it would have probably been all right.
Yeah. If the album went like triple platinum and you
that would be
had
like
to put out single number 4, single 5, eventually we would have got to it.
That would have been like the 5th one, or the one that was just a video or something.
Yeah.
This evening was actually a throwaway from the first Idle Sons record. It wasn't going to make it onto the second Idle Sons record, which was also the first Idle Sons record. It was from the Atlantic record. And I don't think any of us were like super partial to it. But again, it was one that I think Ryan really fought for. And he was like, no, I think it's more diverse. It does something that nothing else on the record does. Which it had this nice, really woody acoustic guitar creating all this motion in the background in the verses. I think it might be, there's only 2 songs, I think, on the whole record that have acoustic guitar on it. And that's one of them. And that's one of the oldest songs that we had brought to the Atlantic record. And it kind of just kept hanging around. And that's another one, like, it got reworked and reworked and reworked and reworked. And it's got a great bridge. The bridge ended up being really great in it. And that was something that we worked through with Gavin McKillop on the Atlantic record. We did like a month of pre-pro on the first go around and literally like deconstructed every song. And that was one where he was like, you need a better bridge, come up with something better. And, we all stick our heads together and like, well, what if we tried this or that, or what if we did this? And it ended up being kind of like a sleeper where it was like, I think it's one of the better sounding songs on the record. But it's definitely wasn't one that we would have considered to be a single.